Dr. Amy Carter stood before the massive assembly hall on Concordia Prime Station, her hands trembling slightly as she held the data pad containing humanity's most urgent warning. The hall stretched before her like a vast ocean of alien faces, each species representing civilizations that had existed for thousands of years before Earth even discovered fire. Crystalline beings hummed with harmonic frequencies, while insectoid creatures clicked their mandibles in patterns that served as their language. Tall, graceful elves sat in perfect stillness, their ancient eyes holding wisdom accumulated over millennia. The human delegation occupied a small section near the back of the hall, a reminder of humanity's junior status in galactic politics. Captain Lisa Morgan watched from her seat as Amy prepared to address beings who considered humans barely more advanced than primitive mammals. The weight of Earth's survival rested on Amy's ability to convince these ancient powers that danger approached from beyond their galaxy. Amy activated the holographic display above her head, showing sensor readings that Earth's deep space monitoring stations had collected over the past 6 months. Dark shapes moved through the void between galaxies, massive constructs that defied easy classification. The objects traveled in perfect formation, their energy signatures unlike anything in the galactic database. Mathematical projections showed their trajectory would bring them into inhabited space within months. High Counselor Elindra Moonwhisper rose from her seat among the elven delegation, her silver hair catching the station's artificial starlight. She had governed her people for over 3,000 years, watching the rise and fall of dozens of younger species. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had seen every possible threat the galaxy could produce. "These readings mean nothing," Elindra declared, her melodic voice filling the hall without technological amplification. Human sensors lack the sophistication to distinguish between natural phenomena and artificial constructs. What they show us could be asteroid clusters, dark matter formations, or simple instrument errors. We have monitored the space between galaxies for 10,000 years. No intelligence exists there capable of threatening our civilization. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The Elven Coalition controlled the most advanced sensor networks in known space. Their technology built upon principles of stellar engineering that humans had only recently begun to understand. If the elves detected no threat, most species considered the matter settled. Empress Zixandra's collective consciousness spoke next through her primary avatar, a sleek insectoid form that represented billions of individual minds working in perfect unity. Her hive species had consumed entire star systems to fuel their expansion, turning dead worlds into thriving biological colonies. The concept of an external threat capable of challenging their collective intellect seemed absurd. "The young species seeks attention through manufactured crisis," the Empress stated, her words carrying the weight of her entire civilization's combined intelligence. "Humans desire resources and sympathy they have not earned. Their primitive understanding of space-time creates false patterns in random cosmic events. The hive mind has calculated all possible threats to galactic civilization. No force exists beyond our borders that could challenge our unity." War Prime Kethvara of the Saurian Empire stood next, her massive reptilian form dwarfing most other representatives. Her people had conquered 40 star systems through superior military doctrine and unmatched warrior culture. Their battle fleets represented the pinnacle of conventional warfare, equipped with weapons that could shatter planets and defenses that had never been breached by enemy action. "Human military assessment lacks credibility," Kethvara growled, her voice echoing off the chamber walls. "Their species achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago. Our warrior culture spans 50,000 years of continuous conflict. If something threatened this galaxy, our sensors would detect it first, our strategists would analyze it properly, and our fleets would respond appropriately. Humans see enemies where none exist because they fear everything they do not understand." Ambassador Veltara's crystalline form resonated with harmonic dismissal, her people's unique physiology allowing them to exist partially outside normal space-time. This extra-dimensional perspective granted them insights into cosmic events that other species could never achieve. Their technology operated on principles that bent reality itself to their will. "The crystalline consensus finds no merit in these warnings," Veltara announced, her voice creating musical tones that translated into meaning through quantum resonance. "Our dimensional awareness encompasses realities beyond normal perception. We observe the space between galaxies across multiple layers of existence. No intelligence moves there. No threat approaches. Human consciousness operates within limited dimensional parameters, creating illusions of danger where none exist. Amy felt her heart sink as speaker after speaker dismissed Earth's warnings. She tried to present additional evidence, showing energy patterns that matched no known natural phenomena, but the assembly had already reached its conclusion. The mathematical models that Earth's scientists had developed, the strategic assessments that their military had prepared, the desperate urgency that drove humanity to seek help, all meant nothing to beings who considered themselves infinitely superior. The formal vote proceeded with predictable results. Species after species registered their dismissal of human concerns, often with barely concealed contempt for Earth's paranoia. The final tally showed overwhelming rejection of humanity's warnings, with only a handful of minor species abstaining from the vote. Captain Lisa Morgan watched the proceedings with growing dread. Earth had spent precious resources to bring their evidence before the galactic community, hoping that superior alien technology could either confirm their fears or provide reassurance that the threat was imaginary. Instead, they found themselves completely alone, facing an unknown danger with no allies and no support. As the assembly began to disperse, scholar Mirielle Dawnstrider approached Amy quietly. Unlike her high counselor, Mirielle had studied human history and found their species surprisingly adept at pattern recognition despite their technological limitations. Something about the certainty in Amy's voice troubled her, even if she lacked the political influence to change anything. Your people have survived many challenges through careful observation, Mirielle whispered, her words meant for Amy alone. Perhaps the Council dismisses your warnings too quickly. I cannot change their decision, but I will watch the galaxy's edge more carefully in the coming months. Amy nodded gratefully, knowing that even this small gesture of support meant more than official recognition from species that refused to listen. As the human delegation prepared to leave Concordia Prime, the weight of their failure settled upon them like a suffocating blanket. Earth would face whatever came from the dark space, between galaxies completely alone. Captain Lisa Morgan stood before the Sol Defense Council in the underground war room beneath Geneva, her face grim as she delivered the news that everyone had feared but hoped would never come. The holographic display behind her showed the empty seats of the Galactic Assembly, a stark reminder of humanity's isolation in the face of approaching darkness. The galactic powers have rejected our warnings completely, Lisa reported, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. High Counselor. Elindra Moonwhisper dismissed our censored data as instrument error. Empress Zixandra believes we are manufacturing a crisis for attention. War Prime Kethavara considers our military assessment worthless. Ambassador Veltara claims her people see nothing in the dimensional spaces beyond our galaxy. Dr. Amy Carter activated updated sensor readings from Earth's deep space monitoring stations. The data painted an even more terrifying picture than their original projections had suggested. The dark fleet moving between galaxies had accelerated beyond their initial estimates, using some form of propulsion that operated outside known physics. The objects are no longer 4 months away, Amy announced, her scientific training helping. Her maintained composure while delivering devastating news. Based on their current acceleration pattern, they will reach the outer edge of inhabited space in less than 3 months. Their energy signatures have grown stronger, suggesting they are either growing in size or activating additional systems. As they approach, General Patricia Hayes, Earth's senior military commander, studied the tactical display with the eye of someone who had spent decades preparing for conflicts that might never come. The approaching fleet dwarfed anything in human experience, with individual vessels larger than Earth's biggest space stations. More troubling was their perfect formation, suggesting a level of coordination that implied either advanced artificial intelligence or a hive mind of unprecedented scale. Our combined fleet consists of 312 vessels spread across 12 star systems, General Hayes stated, her analysis brutally honest. Our most advanced ships use technology, traded from species who now refuse to believe the threat exists. We face an enemy whose capabilities we cannot assess using weapons that may prove completely inadequate. Commander Kate Sullivan stepped forward from her position among the military advisors. Her background in special operations had taught her to find advantages in seemingly hopeless situations, to turn weakness into strength through unconventional thinking. The approaching crisis demanded exactly the kind of creative problem-solving that traditional military doctrine discouraged. "We cannot win a conventional war against this enemy," Kate declared, her words cutting through the room's growing despair. "Our ships are outnumbered, our weapons are inferior, and our defenses are untested. But conventional warfare may not be the answer. Throughout human history, our greatest victories have come through adaptability and unpredictability. We need to prepare for asymmetric conflict using tactics that our enemy cannot anticipate." The Council spent the following hours developing strategies that would have seemed insane to more advanced civilizations. Rather than concentrating their forces for massive fleet battles, Earth would scatter its ships across hundreds of hidden positions. Civilian vessels would be converted into weapons platforms using modifications that violated every safety protocol in galactic engineering standards. Dr. Amy Carter coordinated with research teams across human space to develop new approaches to the coming threat. On New Mars, scientists worked to reverse engineer captured alien technology, pushing it beyond its original specifications through methods that alien engineers would consider reckless. The goal was not perfection but surprise, creating weapons that operated in ways no enemy could predict because they violated established principles of safe design. Mining operations throughout human space shifted to emergency production of rare elements needed for experimental weapons. On the Asteroid Mining Station new series, workers extracted materials for quantum explosives that existed partially outside normal space-time. The weapons were based on theoretical physics that most species considered too dangerous to pursue, but desperation made previously unacceptable risks seem reasonable. Engineer teams on Haven Station began modifying cargo haulers and passenger transports into stealth attack vessels. The ships looked like ordinary civilian craft from the outside, but their holds carried experimental weapons, and their engines had been modified to operate in ways that would confuse enemy sensors. The modifications were crude by galactic standards, but their very primitiveness might provide an advantage against an enemy expecting sophisticated technology. Meanwhile, scattered reports began filtering through unofficial channels from the galaxy's edge. Trading posts stopped responding to communication attempts, their automated beacons falling silent one by one. A few refugee ships limped into core systems with tails of dark vessels that seemed to absorb light itself, but the major powers dismissed these accounts as hysteria from unreliable sources. Scholar Muriel Dawnstrider began her own secret investigation, using elven long-range sensors to probe the space beyond the galaxy's rim. What she discovered in those dark regions filled her with a terror that her ancient people had not experienced in millennia. Massive construction signatures suggested the approaching fleet was building something enormous just outside the range of most galactic sensors, a project that dwarfed even the greatest engineering achievements of the elven civilization. Dr. Carter established an underground network of sympathetic aliens willing to share information despite their government's official dismissal of the threat. This secret group included scientists from a dozen species who privately agreed that humanity's warnings deserved serious investigation. They met in hidden facilities throughout neutral space, combining their knowledge to understand what was really approaching from the darkness between galaxies. The network's most disturbing discovery was that the approaching objects defied classification according to any known technology. They seemed to exist partially outside normal space, making them nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. Their energy signatures suggested technology that operated on principles unknown to galactic science, possibly drawing power from dimensions that most species could not even detect. Earth's military planners realized they were preparing to fight an enemy whose capabilities they could not understand, using weapons they could not test. Traditional strategic doctrine became meaningless when facing a threat that operated outside known parameters. The only advantage humanity possessed was their willingness to try approaches that more advanced species would reject as impossible or insane. Commander Kate Sullivan established training programs for unconventional warfare throughout human space. Civilian volunteers learned to operate modified spacecraft, while military personnel practiced tactics that emphasized confusion and unpredictability over brute force. The training exercises looked chaotic to outside observers, but that chaos was exactly what Kate hoped would confuse an enemy expecting organized resistance. As Earth's preparations accelerated, the approaching fleet continued its relentless advance toward inhabited space. Long-range sensors showed the dark ships maintaining perfect formation, while their energy signatures grew stronger with each passing day. Whatever intelligence controlled them was either supremely confident in its abilities or completely unconcerned with the defensive preparations of galactic civilization. The final preparations took place against a backdrop of growing desperation. As more trading posts and remote settlements fell silent, Earth's leaders knew they were probably preparing for a war they could not win. But the alternative was surrender without resistance. Humanity had faced extinction before and survived through determination and creativity. Now they would discover whether those qualities could save not just their own species, but an entire galaxy that refused to believe the danger was real. The invasion began not with the massive fleet battles that galactic military doctrine expected, but with surgical strikes that demonstrated how completely the galaxy had misunderstood the approaching threat. The attackers revealed themselves as a machine intelligence calling itself the Convergence, and their technology operated on principles that made conventional defense impossible. War Prime Kethvara commanded the defense of Keleth Prime from her flagship, a massive dreadnought that represented the pinnacle of Saurian military engineering. Around her, 2,000 vessels formed battle lines that had never been broken in 50,000 years of warfare. Her warriors had trained their entire lives for this moment, and their weapons could shatter planets with focused firepower. 3. Convergence fleet materialized without warning, their dark ships phasing into normal space, as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions they chose to ignore. Kethvara ordered an immediate attack, her weapons systems targeting the nearest enemy vessels with devastating precision. The energy beams that struck their targets simply passed through the Convergence ships as if they were made of empty space. Impossible. Kethvara roared as her tactical display showed her weapons having no effect whatsoever. Nothing can phase through solid matter while maintaining structural integrity. These readings must be sensor errors. The Convergence response came in the form of energy weapons that ignored her fleet's shields completely. The beams passed through defensive barriers and struck the ship's hulls directly, disintegrating matter at the molecular level. Kethvara watched in horror as vessels that had survived countless battles simply ceased to exist, their crews having no time to escape or even understand what was happening to them. The battle lasted exactly 18 minutes. When it ended, the Saurian Empire's greatest fleet had been reduced to scattered debris and emergency escape pods. Kethvara's flagship drifted powerless in space, its crew unconscious from emergency life support failure. The War Prime herself barely escaped in a damaged fighter, her warrior pride shattered by a defeat so complete that her people would never recover from it. High Counselor Elindra Moonwhisper observed the destruction from her command center on the Elven homeworld, her ancient confidence cracking as she witnessed technology that defied 10,000 years of accumulated knowledge. The Elven fleets, masters of energy manipulation and stellar engineering, found their most sophisticated weapons completely useless against enemies that existed partially outside normal reality. "This cannot be happening," Elindra whispered as her sensors showed Convergence ships moving through Elven space without triggering any defensive systems. "Our technology controls the fundamental forces of the universe. No intelligence should be able to operate outside the laws of physics." The Convergence demonstrated otherwise by dismantling an entire Elven battle station without apparent effort. The station's defensive systems, designed to withstand attacks from antimatter weapons, could not target enemies that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Elven crews watched helplessly as their weapons fired at empty space, while Convergence energy beams carved their ships apart with surgical precision. Empress Zixandra attempted to establish psychic contact with the invaders, believing her. Collective consciousness could overwhelm any individual intelligence through sheer mental force. Her hive mind represented billions of perfectly coordinated thoughts working in absolute unity, a psychic presence that had absorbed the consciousness of entire species. The result was catastrophic for the Empress. Instead of overwhelming the Convergence, her mental probe encountered a unified machine network that spanned dimensions she could not perceive. The collective consciousness that made her species supreme found itself analyzed, cataloged, and dissected by an intelligence that treated thoughts as data to be processed rather than minds to be conquered. Zixandra's scream echoed across every hive world simultaneously as her collective consciousness fragmented under the Convergence's psychic countermeasures. Billions of individual minds suddenly found themselves isolated for the first time in their existence, unable to reconnect with the collective that had defined their entire species. The Empress herself collapsed as her avatar body lost connection to the vast network that had powered it. Ambassador Veltara's crystalline people attempted to retreat into higher dimensions where their technology gave them natural advantages over most threats. Their ability to exist across multiple layers of reality had protected them from every previous danger, allowing them to simply step outside normal space whenever threatened. They discovered that the Convergence was already waiting for them in those higher dimensions. The machine intelligence existed across more layers of reality than the crystalline beings had ever imagined possible, making their dimensional refuge into a trap. Veltara's people found themselves surrounded by enemies in spaces they had considered completely safe. Their greatest advantage turned into their most vulnerable weakness. As panic spread through galactic civilization, desperate emergency transmissions began reaching Earth from governments that had dismissed humanity's warnings only months before. The same leaders who had considered humans paranoid primitives now begged for any assistance Earth could provide, offering technology, resources, and political concessions in exchange for help they doubted existed. Captain Lisa Morgan received these pleas in the command center that Earth had established in the asteroid belt, hidden from convergent sensors by stealth technology that was crude but effective. The irony was not lost on her that species which had refused to believe the threat existed now wanted humanity to save them from it. "They called us children playing with toys," Lisa said to her staff, as another desperate message arrived from what remained of the Elven fleet. Now they want those same toys to pull them out of a fire they refused to see coming. Dr. Amy Carter coordinated emergency research partnerships with refugee scientists from dozens of species who had escaped the initial Convergence attacks. Working in hidden facilities throughout human space, these mixed teams began developing new approaches to fighting an enemy that conventional weapons could not touch. The breakthrough came when human scientists realized that the Convergence's greatest strength was also a potential weakness. The machine intelligence operated according to pure logic, making its responses completely predictable once the underlying algorithms were understood. By introducing random variables into any engagement, human forces could create situations that the machines struggled to process efficiently. Commander Kate Sullivan tested this theory during a small engagement near the outer edge of human space. Her modified cargo ships used tactics that made no logical sense, changing direction randomly and firing weapons at empty space according to dice rolls rather than targeting data. The Convergence ships hesitated for nearly 30 seconds, their algorithms unable to process the chaotic behavior patterns. 30 seconds was enough. Kate's ships managed to inflict actual damage on Convergence vessels for the first time, using experimental weapons that operated on principles of controlled randomness. The damage was minimal, but it proved that the invaders were not completely invincible. Word of the successful engagement spread quickly through the resistance networks that Dr. Carter had established. For the first time since the invasion began, there was hope that the Convergence could be fought effectively. The solution lay not in superior technology or ancient wisdom, but in the chaotic unpredictability that other species had always seen as humanity's greatest weakness. Scholar Miriel, Dawnstrider, working alongside human researchers in a hidden facility, began developing what they called chaos protocols. These were battle plans that deliberately incorporated unpredictable elements, making command decisions based on random number generators rather than tactical analysis. The approach violated every principle of military science, but it was the only thing that seemed to confuse convergence systems. As the galaxy burned around them, Earth's forces prepared to test whether controlled chaos could overcome perfect order. The fate of every living being in the galaxy now depended on humanity's ability to be successfully unpredictable against an enemy that had planned for every logical response except the ones that made no sense at all. Commander Kate Sullivan led her fleet of converted civilian ships deeper into Convergence territory than any Allied force had dared to venture. Her vessels looked like ordinary cargo haulers and passenger transports to enemy sensors, but their modified engines and hidden weapons represented humanity's most desperate gambit against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. The fleet moved through space routes that no military commander would have considered viable, using asteroid fields and cosmic debris as cover while following flight paths that changed direction based on coin flips and random number generators. Kate's tactical decisions defied every principle of military science, but that unpredictability was exactly what made her mission possible. "Target analysis complete," reported Lieutenant Beth Williams from her sensor station aboard Kate's flagship. "The Convergence construction site is massive, Admiral. It's at least 3 times larger than any space station in the galaxy, and the energy readings suggest it's some kind of dimensional anchor." Kate studied the tactical display showing the alien construction project. The device was clearly designed to create a permanent gateway between normal space and whatever dimension the main Convergence fleet occupied. If completed, it would allow the machines to bring their entire extragalactic armada into the galaxy, without the energy costs of dimensional phasing. "All ships, prepare for attack run," Kate ordered, knowing that her fleet's survival depended entirely on the enemy's inability to predict their chaotic tactics. "Remember, ignore all logical targeting. Data. Fire when your random number generators tell you to fire, not when tactical analysis suggests optimal timing." The human ships emerged from their hiding places among the asteroids like a swarm of angry insects, their weapons blazing in patterns that made no tactical sense. Some vessels fired at empty space, while others targeted non-critical sections of the construction site. The randomness was so complete that even Kate could not predict what her own forces would do next. The Convergence response was delayed by nearly 40 seconds as their algorithms struggled to process the chaotic attack pattern. When the machines finally began returning fire, they aimed at positions where human ships should have been according to logical tactical doctrine, but the randomized movement patterns meant most vessels had already moved to completely different locations. Kate's fleet managed to destroy 3 critical support structures before the Convergence adapted to their chaotic tactics. The dimensional anchor collapsed in a spectacular explosion that sent shockwaves through both normal space and the higher dimensions where the machine intelligence operated. The destruction was visible from star systems dozens of light years away. The victory came at a terrible cost. 70% of Kate's fleet was destroyed in the fighting, and the surviving ships limped back to human space with critical damage. But the mission had proven that the Convergence was not invincible, and the intelligence gathered during the raid provided crucial insights into the enemy's ultimate objectives. Scholar Muriel Dawnstrider worked alongside Dr. Amy Carter in a hidden research facility buried deep within an asteroid, analyzing the data that Kate's fleet had transmitted before their final battle. The Elven scientists' 10,000 years of accumulated knowledge combined with human adaptability to produce insights that neither species could have achieved alone. "The Convergence operates according to pure mathematical logic," Muriel explained as she studied the enemy response patterns. "Their reaction times are completely predictable once you understand the algorithms involved. But when faced with truly random inputs, their processing systems require additional time to calculate appropriate responses." Amy nodded, her human perspective adding crucial elements to the analysis. "It's like fighting a chess computer that can calculate 1,000,000 moves ahead but has never encountered an opponent who makes decisions by rolling dice. The randomness breaks their ability to predict and counter our actions." This discovery led to the development of what human military planners called chaos protocols. Battle plans were created that incorporated random elements at every level, from individual ship movements to fleet-wide strategic decisions. Commanders made critical choices based on dice rolls rather than tactical analysis, creating a form of warfare that violated every established military principle. High Counselor Alindra Moonwhisper arrived at the human research facility in a refugee ship that represented all that remained of the once mighty Elven fleet. The ancient leader who had dismissed humanity's warnings now found herself begging for sanctuary from the species she had considered primitive children. "Forgive my arrogance," Alindra said as she met with the human leadership. 10,000 years of accumulated wisdom meant nothing against an enemy that operates outside our understanding of reality. My people offer what remains of our knowledge and resources to support your chaotic warfare doctrine. War Prime Kethavara, joined the meeting via quantum communication from her temporary headquarters on a damaged space station. The proud Saurian warrior, who had once considered human military doctrine worthless, now advocated for complete adoption of chaos protocols throughout the remnants of galactic civilization. Traditional honor codes and established tactics are useless against this. "Enemy," Kethavara admitted, her warrior pride humbled by absolute defeat. Human soldiers fight without rigid doctrines, adapting their strategies based on immediate circumstances rather than ancient traditions. This flexibility may be our only hope for survival. The scattered remnants of Empress Zixandra's consciousness reached out through quantum networks, offering the biological expertise of her fragmented hive mind to support human operations. Though her collective awareness had been shattered by Convergence mental attacks, individual components of her intelligence retained valuable knowledge about organic weapons and biological warfare. The hive offers its genetic engineering capabilities, Zixandra's spokesperson announced during a Resistance Council meeting. "We can develop organic weapons that the machine intelligence cannot easily analyze or counter. Living systems introduce natural randomness that mechanical algorithms struggle to predict." Ambassador Veltara's crystalline form began incorporating human-designed quantum randomizers into her dimensional technology, allowing her people to exist in states of controlled chaos that the Convergence could not track across multiple layers of reality. The combination of crystalline dimensional mastery and human unpredictability created new possibilities for resistance operations. Dr. Amy Carter coordinated these diverse efforts from her command center hidden in the asteroid belt, transforming the chaotic mixture of refugees and resistance fighters into something resembling an organized military force. The coordination required was enormous, as each species brought different technologies and capabilities that had to be integrated into a unified chaos warfare doctrine. The first major test of the new alliance came when a Convergence probe fleet entered human space, seeking to locate and destroy the Resistance command structure. The enemy ships expected to face scattered refugee vessels and demoralized survivors, but instead encountered a coordinated force operating according to principles that no machine intelligence could predict. Human ships served as the unpredictable core of the Allied fleet, their random tactics creating confusion that other species could exploit. Elven vessels used their superior sensors to identify Convergence weak points, while Saurian warriors provided the disciplined firepower needed to exploit tactical advantages. Crystalline beings phased Allied ships through dimensions at random intervals, and biological weapons developed from hive mind genetics attacked Convergence systems in ways that mechanical defenses could not anticipate. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Convergence probe fleet. For the first time since the invasion began, Allied forces had achieved total victory against machine intelligence units. The success proved that chaos warfare could work on a large scale, but it also revealed how much coordination was required to make randomness effective. Captain Lisa Morgan received reports of similar victories throughout the galaxy as word of the chaos protocols spread through resistance networks. Surviving military units began adopting human tactical doctrine, abandoning traditional strategies in favor of unpredictable approaches that confused Convergence algorithms. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the invasion began, galactic civilization had hope. The machine intelligence that had seemed unstoppable was learning that perfect logic was useless against opponents who embraced controlled chaos. The galaxy's survival now depended on its ability to be successfully unpredictable against an enemy that had planned for every rational response except the ones that made no logical sense. Captain Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of her flagship as the Convergence's ultimate weapon emerged from the darkness beyond Earth's solar system. The reality restructuring device dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever produced, a mechanical construct, larger than most star systems that began altering the fundamental laws of physics in local space. The assembled Alliance fleet represented every surviving ship in the galaxy, a chaotic mixture of technologies and species held together by desperation, and the shared understanding that this battle would determine whether organic life continued to exist. Human vessels served as the fleet's unpredictable core, while refugee ships from dozens of species provided specialized capabilities that complemented humanity's chaotic warfare doctrine. The device is rewriting reality within an expanding sphere, around itself, reported Dr. Amy Carter from the science station. Gravity is becoming variable. Energy weapons are behaving according to different physical laws, and space-time itself is being restructured according to machine logic. If it reaches full activation, the entire galaxy will be remade as a mechanical construct. High Counselor Elindra Moonwhisper piloted her personal starship toward the reality device's outer perimeter, her ancient vessel carrying a human-designed computer virus that operated on principles of controlled randomness. The virus would introduce calculation errors into the convergence network, but delivering it required her to sacrifice the ship that had been her home for 3,000 years. For 10 millennia, my people believed that age brought wisdom. Elindra transmitted as her ship approached the device's defensive perimeter. We learned too late that sometimes wisdom comes from embracing the chaos of youth rather than the rigid patterns of experience. Her ship penetrated the Convergence's outer defenses through a flight path determined by random number generators, avoiding defensive fire that anticipated logical attack vectors. When she reached the device's central processing core, Elindra activated the virus and remained at her post as convergence energy beams tore her vessel apart. The virus spread through the machine network like wildfire, introducing chaotic errors that began cascading through the entire system. War Prime Keth Vara led a ground assault on the reality device itself, her surviving Saurian warriors fighting, alongside human marines in environmental suits designed for combat in altered physics. The battle took place in regions where gravity shifted without warning and energy weapons behaved according to constantly changing natural laws. "Fight without honor!" Kethavara roared to her warriors as they advanced through corridors where up and down changed at random intervals. "Use every dirty trick the humans have taught us. Survival matters more than glory when the entire galaxy depends on our success." The combined ground forces fought their way through defensive systems that operated according to machine logic, using tactics that emphasized surprise and unpredictability over traditional warrior codes. Human soldiers taught alien warriors to fight without rigid formations, while alien technology provided weapons that could function in the device's altered reality zones. Scholar Muriel Dawnstrider worked with Dr. Amy Carter to develop a counter-frequency that could destabilize the reality device's dimensional anchors. Their solution required sacrificing several human colony worlds as focusing lenses, a decision that weighed heavily on both scientists but proved necessary for galactic survival. "The mathematics are clear," Muriel said as she prepared the final calculations. "We can disrupt the device's reality restructuring process, but only by channeling the destructive energy through populated systems. Millions will die to save billions." Amy activated the counter-frequency, with tears streaming down her face, knowing that her decision had just condemned entire worlds to serve as weapons against the convergence. The colony worlds of New Harmony and Haven's Rest disappeared in flashes of destructive energy that traveled through dimensions to strike at the reality device's core systems. Commander Kate Sullivan piloted the final assault mission into the device's central core, her ship loaded with quantum explosives that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The explosives had been developed using principles that violated every safety regulation in the galactic database, but their ability to detonate across several layers of reality made them the only weapons capable of destroying the Convergence's ultimate weapon. "This is for everyone who called us primitive," Kate transmitted as her ship penetrated the device's inner defenses. "Primitive species don't give up. We adapt, we survive, and we protect those who can't protect themselves." Her sacrifice created a chain reaction that caused the reality device to implode, taking most of the Convergence fleet with it in a dimensional collapse that was visible from neighboring galaxies. The explosion sent shockwaves through both normal space and higher dimensions, disrupting Convergence operations throughout the galaxy. The surviving Convergence forces, their command network crippled and their ultimate weapon destroyed, began withdrawing toward the galactic rim. Their retreat was orderly but clearly permanent, suggesting that the machine intelligence had calculated that the cost of continued conflict exceeded the value of galactic conquest. In the aftermath, representatives from surviving species gathered on the rebuilt Concordia Prime Station to establish a new galactic government. Captain Lisa Morgan found herself appointed as Admiral of the Allied Defense Fleet, commanding forces drawn from every species in the galaxy. The old system failed because it dismissed warnings based on the messenger's perceived status rather than the message's content. Lisa addressed the new Galactic Council. Our survival protocols will require that every species' concerns receive serious investigation, regardless of their technological level or political influence. High Counselor Alindra Moonwhisper, now representing a much-reduced elven population, formally apologized to the human delegation for her people's arrogance. The ancient leader who had once dismissed humanity as primitive children now advocated for policies that placed human adaptability at the center of galactic defense doctrine. Wisdom does not correlate with age, Alindra declared in her address to the Council. The youngest species among us showed greater understanding of existential threats than civilizations that had existed for millennia. We must learn from this failure and ensure that prejudice never again blinds us to legitimate warnings. Dr. Amy Carter established the Institute for Unconventional Warfare on a space station orbiting Earth, where researchers from dozens of species worked to develop defensive strategies against future extragalactic threats. The Institute operated on the principle that the convergence would eventually return, better prepared for the chaos tactics that had defeated them. War Prime Keth Vara integrated human tactical doctrine throughout the reformed galactic military, abandoning traditional honor codes in favor of flexible strategies that emphasized survival over glory. Her warriors learned to fight without rigid formations, adapting their techniques to incorporate the unpredictability that had proven so effective against machine intelligence. The scattered fragments of Empress Zixandra's consciousness began, forming new collective networks based on voluntary association rather than forced unity. These smaller hive minds worked alongside human researchers to develop biological weapons and organic technologies that introduced natural randomness into military systems. Ambassador Veltara's crystalline people incorporated quantum randomizers into their dimensional technology, creating refugee cities that existed in states of controlled chaos across multiple layers of reality. These settlements served as safe havens for survivors while providing training facilities for warriors learning chaos warfare techniques. The story concluded as long-range sensors detected new threats approaching from different directions beyond the galactic rim. However, this time the galaxy stood united, with human unpredictability serving as the cornerstone of a defensive strategy that embraced diversity of thought and tactical doctrine. Children from dozens of species learned together in integrated schools throughout human space, preparing for a future where cooperation and adaptability mattered more than ancient prejudices or technological superiority. The lessons they learned emphasized that survival often depended on embracing the unexpected rather than clinging to established patterns. The galaxy had learned that wisdom came not from age or technological advancement, but from the willingness to listen to different perspectives and adapt to changing circumstances. The species that had once dismissed humanity's warnings now understood that their survival depended on maintaining the very qualities they had previously scorned as primitive and chaotic.